Chris Bishop.
Well, I don't know what planet Grant Robertson's been living on for the last few years, Mr. Speaker.
Chris.
Because in just the tail end of his speech, we heard from him that the budget policy statement should do other things than talk about GDP. We need to measure things like jobs. We need to measure things like wages. Well, we do measure those things. And the good news for Grant and the good news for the House is that jobs are up 175,000 over the last few years. Unemployment is down to its lowest level in 7 years, 5.3%. Real wages are up over the last 7 years, and in the last year just up 3.1% compared to inflation of 0.1%. We do measure those things, and those measures are heading in the right direction for this economy and, more importantly, sir, for New Zealand families. What else did he say? We should have targets. Let's set some social targets. Well, again, we do that. In 2012, we established the Better Public Services Targets Program, results program, which sets the public service to measure itself against targets, to reduce recidivism, to increase the number of kids getting NCEA Level 2, to reduce youth crime across a whole range of measures. And again, the good news for Grant and the good news for the House is that all of those measures are heading in the right direction.
It is not acceptable for a member to continue to refer to another member just by a Christian name. If it happens again, I'll stop the member's speech.
Apologise, Mr. Speaker. The good news for Mr. Robertson, sir, is that those numbers are heading in the right direction. Sir, I want to, in my contribution today, talk about three things which is reflected in the budget and reflected in the response from the opposition. And the first is fiscal strategy. The second is about our attitude to the outside world. And the third is about the tertiary policy labelled working futures by the Labour opposition. So I want to start with fiscal strategy, sir. And I want to take members back to late 2008 when National inherited the Treasury benches, because members opposite often turn up in the House and they often skite about the fact that the Labour government from 99 to 08 ran 9 years of surpluses, and that is false. The 2008-9 accounts, when they were produced a $3.9 billion deficit, sir. When we came to office, the Treasury was forecasting never-ending budget deficits and debt to blow out to 60% of GDP. These are not National's numbers. This was the fiscal reality we inherited from the profligate opposition. Michael Cullen was gleeful. Mrs King's best mate, Michael Cullen, was gleeful. He went around the Parliament saying, "I've spent the lot. The money's gone. I've spent the lot." He used to crow about that, how there was no money left for anyone to spend. Well, government spending between 2003 and 2008 increased 50% in 5 years. It was simply unsustainable. And we had to spend 7 years getting the books back in order, and that's reflected in the budget policy statement presented before the House and will be reflected in Budget 2016. So this budget policy statement, sir, reflects the considered fiscal discipline of the government. New operating allowances for Budget 2016 is just $1 billion, $2.5 billion for 2017, lower again in 2018 and 19, and these are well below the massive new operating allowances under the Labour opposition. Labour used to say we would never get the books back into the black. In fact, Andrew Little said it was the biggest political con he'd ever seen. Well, it was pretty embarrassing for him when the 2014-15 budget accounts, sir, showed a small, albeit small, but a very definite surplus. So what is their latest strategy? So Labour's latest strategy is to turn up here and complain about debt. And we have David Clark over there always, every day, it's without fail, you can set your clock, set your watch by it. Every day he turns up here and says we're borrowing more money than Muldoon. Well, sir, I put it to the House, it's a little hypocritical, because Labour spent 2009 and 10 saying you've got to go on a massive deficit spending, you've got to go on a debt-fuelled Keynesian stimulus package to get the economy going, all of which involves borrowing. And then they left the government a fiscal mess. They called for more borrowing, and then they had the temerity to turn around and criticise the very borrowing that's maintaining social entitlements and the social welfare safety net, sir. And that is, of course, without considering Labour's current fiscal plans, which is a massive spending blowout on wasteful and ineffective programs such as subsidised macrame classes and Moroccan cooking. So, sir, I want to secondly talk about what this budget policy statement demonstrates about our attitude towards the outside world, because that is now a major fault line in New Zealand politics. And sir, this budget 2015, which is reflected in the policy statement that we considered on the FEC committee, contains support for a range of measures to support an outward-facing, confident New Zealand competing hard in a rapidly globalising and changing world. And our prosperity depends on increasing our global competitiveness, expanding our markets overseas and building on those international connections. But sadly for New Zealand, Labor has spent this past 7 years becoming more and more hostile to free trade, foreign investment and now even migration to New Zealand, sir. And sir, I do want to talk about the Trans-Pacific Partnership Agreement, because sir, this is the apex of foreign and trade policy of New Zealand for the last 30 years. And it is truly sad that the Labor Party that started the Trans-Pacific Partnership Program, sir, the Labor government that started it, will not back it now. Phil Goff knows it is good for New Zealand, sir. Helen Clark knows it is good for New Zealand. Their heads are down, sir. They don't want to engage with this point. Helen Clark knows it is good for New Zealand. She says it's unthinkable we wouldn't be a part of it. David Shearer knows it's good for New Zealand. He's just not allowed to say so publicly because he's not running for the Auckland Mayoralty. Phil Goff knows it's good for New Zealand. Mike Moore knows it's good for New Zealand. In fact, there's barely a Labor leader alive still, sir, who doesn't think it's a good deal for New Zealand, other than Andrew Little. So the reality is, it is unthinkable, as Helen Clark says, that we wouldn't be a part of it. Their arguments, sir, on this are hopeless. I'll tell you what happened today, sir. The government ratified a thing called the International Maritime Convention, sir. The Maritime Labour Convention. Do you know what this convention does? It's an international agreement, and it commits the New Zealand government to introduce measures to address the health, safety and welfare of seafarers on commercial vessels. It's an international agreement. It's binding international law. It commits the New Zealand government to doing various things at international law, and it means that we have to bring our domestic law into compliance with it. It's the Maritime Labour Convention. Have we heard a word from the Labor Party about this terrible international agreement that affects our sovereignty? No. They only want to focus on the Trans-Pacific Partnership Agreement, which is exactly the same in principle as the Maritime Labour Convention. It's an international agreement. It commits New Zealand to doing things on the world stage, and it means we have to change our laws. So their major argument about the TPP is that it affects our sovereignty. Well, so does the Maritime Labour Convention. So I'm looking forward to the outraged press releases and the questions in Parliament and the road shows up and down the country about this outrageous flagrant breach of our sovereignty, which is an international agreement. The reality is, sir, the Labor Party is giving in to its worst instincts. They are backsliding to a 1970s Fortress New Zealand nostalgic view of New Zealand, sir, and the sad reality is actually half the caucus knows it, but they are just so frightened of the hardcore left of the political spectrum losing support to them, sir. We know the Greens can never be relied upon for free trade. Labor used to be able to be relied upon, but not anymore. Lastly, quickly, just on tertiary policy, sir, this budget policy statement continues this government's strong support for tertiary education. But we just heard Grant Robertson Skype about their working futures policy. So they're desperate for a big bang start to the year, desperate to grab the public's attention. So what do? They went right back to their student union roots. The Labor Party leadership went right back to things they know best. What do they know best? What do Grant Robertson, Andrew Little and Chris Hipkins know best? They know all about spending on tertiary. And isn't it indicative of their political priorities? After carping for 5 years about child poverty, they materialise, they magic up $1.2 billion to spend. What do they spend it on? Child poverty? No. Social housing? No. They spend it on the things they know best. Money for students. Now, I'm the first, sir, to defend support for students, but not the policy that the Labor Party is promoting. It will be ineffective. It's ineffective. It will be inequitable, and it is regressive. The Labor Party, which started the student loan scheme, should be defending it as one of the most progressive and successful public policy achievements of any party, of any government. They should not be trying to destroy it. Sir, this was a great budget, and it's reflective of a country that is ambitious and confident and heading in the right direction, led by an ambitious and confident government.